Welcome back to LBMC Cybersecurity Sense. This is William Parks, and I'm here with Andy Kerr and Kyle Hinterberg for another episode for Requirement 9 on PCI topics. So, gentlemen, how are y'all doing today? You guys doing okay?
Doing pretty good.
New year, guys. New year, so we can make it through it.
Happy New Year.
You got 362 days or something like that from now on.
Yeah, I can.
Don't be counting down already.
New Year, same us, same requirements. So you know. Oh man! All right, folks. Well, today, in same old fashion as we usually do, we typically hit the news first, then we go into the requirement of the month for PCI standards. So, as always, we're gonna let Kyle kick off the news. Kyle, what's happening in the world of PCI stuff right now?
Well, I'd say that the first thing, it's not exactly news, but we're into 2024 now, which is the year that PCI DSS version 4 is officially going to be required. And so we just have a few short months, essentially on our side here at LBMC for any of the projects we're doing. Pretty soon here, it's going to hit the cutoff point where all of our projects are going to be forced into 4.0 because they just won't have time to wrap up within the 3-2-1 period. And so, if you haven't yet, this is kind of your last chance. Get yourself ready, because if your assessment isn't like essentially starting this week, you're probably going to have to end within the 4.0 timeframe. So you should be ready if you're not already.
Mm-hmm. We're cueing the Jeopardy theme music back here, waiting for you guys to make the switch.
and on 4.0, another piece of news is they have been, if anyone's read all the way through the DSS, I'm sure you've noticed that there's some minor inconsistencies and typos, and so it is going through a minor update. I think it's supposed to be done within the next like somewhere in the first half of this year is I think all they've really said. They are right now in a request for comments. And so if you happen to be part of like a principal participating organization or like one of the board on the PCI council, you can actually put comments in to suggest changes. But even if you're not, it's just something to be aware of that, somewhere within the first half of this year, there should be probably, PCI DSS 4.1. But it's going to be, I believe, a pretty minor change. Again, mostly focused on things like typos or minor inconsistencies. From what they've said, it's not going to change requirements or make anyone do anything differently. If you're already prepped for 4.0, don't think you're going to have to change anything. It's just, again, typos, clarifications, those types of things.
When does the request for comments period close?
It's supposed to close at the end of January 24th. So that's when the request for comments should close. And then, within the next couple of months, hopefully they get that all wrapped up and sooner rather than later get that issued out. To me, it'd be really nice if they were able to issue the updated version before 4.0 was required in April. But, the odds of that happening are, it's possible, but that seems like a pretty tight turnaround.
Oh, yeah. The bureaucracy is the only constant in the universe.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
And I'd say the last bit of news is just, last year they started the concept of the global content library, which is just where they're putting all the content from the community meetings and other things that they are doing, that the SSE is doing. They're putting it all in a central location that they refer to as the PCI SSE Global Content Library. And just last month, they uploaded all of the information from all the community meetings that were held last year. So if you, didn't have a chance to go to them, that's your chance. You can go sign up. If you did attend a community meeting, I think that gets you free access. Or if you are, I believe, a participating organization, that gives you access. Otherwise, you can just pay for one-off access to, gain access and watch all the media that was provided there. And if you do, I would definitely recommend checking out the generative AI talk that Brian Willis and myself gave at the North America community meeting last year.
Not a biased input here, but definitely go check out the talk. Perfect. Awesome, Kyle. I guess that's it for the news today.
Yeah, that's about it. And, I feel like most things, kind of over the new year and in December, not a lot of news. Everyone's just, hunkering down and enjoying the holidays rather than trying to make news.
Yeah, and that's the slow part of coming back from the holidays. You took off time, had all that food at Christmas, and the New Year's came around because you had a really odd like half work week in between Christmas and New Year's. I don't know. Some people did. I know I did. And now it's time to get back into the grind of things and get things rolling again. So it's just a slow upturn for everybody. So for this month, guys, we're gonna be hitting requirement 9, like I said in the intro. This section is titled "Restrict Physical Access to Cardholder Data," which, funny enough, I feel like all of this just kind of encompasses that title. I feel like all these requirements do. So cool. Guys, I'll let you take it away and start to educate us on some of this stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, there's not a whole lot of new requirements here. There's 2 new requirements, but the rest are either clarification or structural formats of the requirements in 3.2.1. So there's not a lot of new stuff, but definitely some changes as far as guidance and clarification and structure.
Yeah, I would totally agree that, for the most part, 9 is still the same as 9 has ever been. The one thing I like on the clarification side is they've now updated and called out that there's essentially 3 different types of physical areas. And it's, your CDE or your cardholder data environment, and then sensitive areas, which is really, kind of areas that need heightened security within your cardholder data environment. It might be places where you're like storing card information. And lastly, you have facility controls that are, at the edge of your facility, like your reception desk and stuff, that likely those aren't within your cardholder data environment, but they're still providing security for your cardholder data environment. And the cool thing with that is just now they've clarified it. So when you're reading through all of the requirement 9 sub-requirements, it says, this is for facility controls, or this is for your CDE or sensitive areas. So it's a little bit easier to understand which controls apply at which level of that, physical security hierarchy. One thing too that I realized, I guess this has always been true, but I never really thought about it too much until I was going through kind of some notes for this episode, is that really, if you break it down, there's essentially, really just 3 parts of requirement 9. And one is, really securing a physical space, where people are walking around, be it call centers, data centers, whatever. 2 is securing physical media, be it, paper reports or hard drives or things of that nature that have cardholder data on them. And then lastly, securing POI devices or pin pads. And that's really it. Those are the 3 points. Is if you have a physical area where cardholder data is in any way stored, processed, or transmitted, or even, that would include speaking it, so if you have a call center and you're not storing really or processing too much, but you just have someone who's reading back a card number or something like that, is part of your CDE, and that's part of the physical area you have to protect. Or then if you have a hard drive or, receipts that have cardholder information, that would be, that kind of media side of it. And then if you have POI devices, those are really the 3 things you have to think about for requirement 9.
Okay, and that's 9 overarching, like the whole, like that's kind of all of 9.
Yeah, and here's one of the and this is not a new requirement, but I did want to mention this because I keep running into this on several different cases. When a lot of times when folks have instituted some sort of it's not a P2PE solution. It's something like, hey, their credit cards are being processed through their registers or, wherever the card present transactions, stores, gas stations, etc., wherever that may happen. And they're not using P2PE. The physical access, and this is all something from 3.2.1, is it says either some sort of authentication control or surveillance. And a lot of folks will make the mistake of thinking they have to do both, but no, it is only one. Now, this authentication control that I've seen multiple times across multiple merchants is what will end up happening is the network closet will be in some sort of manager's office or back office, or where you have folks that are coming in and out of that area all the time, and there's no surveillance on it, there's no badge reader, it's just a manager's office, and they really don't think that much about it going in and out of there. But because that credit card number is being processed through some sort of server or some sort of network equipment that going through there, there has to be an authentication control. And a lot of folks will ask, well, what exactly does that? It doesn't have to be a badge reader. It doesn't have to be super technical. Bare minimum, it can be a, hey, we have only specific folks that have keys to this office, and okay, well, now you need to have some sort of log of it. You need to be able to say, hey, what date, what time those people. Now, that can be incredibly inconvenient if that is an office that people are coming in and out of all day long. But it will meet the requirement. It will meet the spirit of what that requirement is supposed to be, basically tracking who's coming in and out of there. So, yeah, it just a thought for some of those folks that I've run across, especially over the past couple of years. The authentication control can be very, very, very basic. But ideally, you would want to have surveillance on wherever that network equipment is.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, to your point, Andy, that's one where everyone always goes to, they think that they have to have surveillance and badges or whatever. But at the end of the day, to answer our question, it's just, can you tell me on, such and such a day who accessed that room or that media, who went in and out? And if they have a way to tell you that's, verifiable, that's what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I bring that one up. I know normally on these, we've been trying to stay specifically on the new requirements, but this is one that always comes up that I keep seeing. And I just want to throw it out there for anybody that's listening to the podcast and struggles with, this particular requirement. You can get by with the very, best practice isn't always, best practice is security, but compliance is not security, but it can drive security. So just something for those folks. You can get by with the bare minimum in order to meet compliance, but it's not necessarily best practice.
Yeah. And I would say on that side too, it totally depends on, the risk involved is on that security standpoint worth taking into consideration. If it's just one room that only 3 people are ever going to, it's not worth spending thousands of dollars to put, a badge system in place. I totally get that. Right. But if you have, multiple data centers with multiple doors and hundreds of people, then, we're probably not going to pass you if you try to claim that you have individual keys that you're handing out and signing out and trying to do that all manually, because that's just impossible.
Right.
Gosh, that'd be wild. That would be so hectic. Oh my God.
Kind of on a similar vein of not a new requirement at all, but just something that I feel like at times gets overlooked is, when you do have a badge system, that badge system is part of your scope. People, I feel like don't always think about that, but that badge system, allows you to provide someone access to an in-scope environment, allows you to, enable, disable badges that are letting people in or out of the, that cardholder data environment. And so that actual system, odds are it's some type of a, computer program, or, you're accessing it through the web or whatever. That environment, that application is in scope, how you're logging into it, how you're signing into it, how it's logging what it's doing. All of those are things that you need to consider for all of the other PCI requirements, because, again, that's controlling that physical access, which is really critical to compliance and security. I don't know if that's something you've ever run into, Andy, where people kind of dismiss that almost from a PCI standpoint.
Yeah, I've run into several instances of something like that. It's when it comes to requirement 9, I feel like, I don't know, it's one of the easiest ones that can be met, but I feel like it's almost one of the ones that gets neglected the most. Because people think it's so easy. Oh, I can pass requirement 9. Yeah, we've got controls in place. And then they kind of overlook it until they run into, oh, wow. Oh, this is going to cost us so many dollars. And we didn't even anticipate this. And now we have to ask for an extension and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I agree. I was going to say on the same note, as we're kind of talking about these surveillance and talking about authentication controls, obviously having a listed P2PE solution tends to eliminate that. So hey, we're using in our retail outlets and our gas stations, whatever that may be, we're using a P2PE listed solution. So one of the new requirements that's kind of altered and changed that is 3.2.1 says you have to do some sort of periodic inspection of the devices. Well, PCI never really said what that is. Now they've kind of called that out and said, okay, well, this is where guys, and Kyle, I don't know if you noticed this as well. One of the new requirements is that there has to be a definition of what that periodic is for the inspections. It'll say targeted risk analysis. However, here's the catch. In something like if you have applied the SAQ P2PE set of requirements as a merchant, and you're kind of using a subset of requirements, it doesn't include how to do a targeted risk analysis, which is in 12.3.1. So it's like it'll say, hey, SAQ P2PE, you have a listed solution. Great. Make sure you use a targeted risk analysis to define what that inspection period will look like, but it doesn't include how you have to do it like it would in 12.3.1 for all the other requirements. I'm like, well, they seem to would go hand in hand here, where you would need the 12.3.1 in order to do the targeted risk analysis.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, if you essentially, it makes me think that if you are using a P2PE scope reduction on a rock, you're still going to need to include 12.3.1 to be able to cover how to do targeted risk analyses, even if that's not one of the requirements that's required by the P2PE SAQ.
And this goes back to a conversation we've had internally at LBMC, and I know there was some guidance that went out from the council regarding service providers that trying to apply SAQ set of sub requirements to their report on compliance. So, but that didn't necessarily mean that's all you're going to have. So I think if you're a merchant and you're trying to apply any SAQ, whether that's an SAQA and say you have an e-commerce environment where you're using some sort of iframe, but you also have a listed P2PE solution. So you're thinking in your head, well, I can just apply the SAQA set of requirements and SAQ P2PE set of requirements and to my rock, and I'm going to be good to go. Well, not necessarily. So you need to make sure as a QSA that you're being very vigilant and checking a lot of these that may apply just like 12.3.1 would apply in this particular situation. So I know in the industry it happens all the time. As a QSA, we'll try to apply this subset of requirements to the rock for a merchant or service provider, and in some cases you have to apply a little bit more than what's just said in those SAQs.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I absolutely agree. And that's a good point, that if you're not just filling out the literal check boxes in the SAQ, odds are you're going to have to go a little bit above and beyond, what's just listed there if you, are doing a rock, even if you are using that SAQ, scope reduction, essentially.
Yeah.
It makes me think too, kind of for future notes, once we get through these last few requirements, we should possibly jump into, some episodes covering the SAQs, since we're, got to think about that. We only have another 3 requirements to go after 9.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, everybody too, is that I know myself and several members of our team have already started to notice some discrepancies in some of the things that are listed in the SAQs already. Now, again, that may, for the, there may be some changes coming up. Maybe the council's already noticed those, but more of some confusion as far as when do those SAQs apply. But yeah, that's definitely a topic we could cover.
Mm-hmm. I think that'd be a great idea.
One other easy thing on requirement 9, kind of on the POI device side, a clarification that they added with 4.0 that helps is if you have POI devices, basically pin pads that are taking credit card information, the requirements in requirement 9 only apply to those if they actually are being used to physically accept credit card information, meaning that someone is using that credit card to dip or tap or swipe, with that POI device. If you happen to have, there are some organizations that use POI devices in like a call center environment where
that's a good one.
Yeah, that cardholder calls in, they give the call center agent their credit card number. That call center agent is hand keying in that credit card number into that POI device. That POI device does not qualify to need to adhere to all of the requirement 9 stuff. It would still be in scope from a digital aspect, as far as the other requirements in PCI, like thinking about like 2, 3, 4, following those specific requirements. But from a physical standpoint, it doesn't need to go through inspections because it's internal. There's no access to external people, doing something. And even if someone loaded a skimming device on it, it wouldn't do anything since it's not, physically interacting with card numbers. So if you do have that type of an environment where people are hand keying cards in and it's never touching a physical card, you don't need to necessarily worry about requirement 9.
Not that I'm suggesting it. I'm just saying, a hacker is out there somewhere, or some internal employee that feels like he's a hacker is going to create an overlay on the keypad. So when they punch those keypads, they're capturing credit card numbers. I know I'm not the only one thinking that.
Hint, wink, wink over here.
At least the only thing I can say is if you fall victim to that, they can't say you weren't compliant because that's not a requirement for compliance. Right. So you maybe weren't secure, but you weren't non-compliant.
Yep. I had a client recently ask me about that. Because all their call center folks went home, and so they have no call center anymore. They're like, well, what about our points of interaction? Do we have to have everybody do an inspection of those devices? I'm like, no, that's not the intent here. So, but
home.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, you could probably say, hey, maybe your kid's a hacker and maybe they came into your office and put a little, skimming device on your keypad and now they're picking up all the digits that you're entering. And I mean, you could go down the rabbit hole and it would just get out of hand. But, this is where PCI has to somewhat push generic, reasonable type things, but you know how it is. You always got somebody. Well, what happens if this happens and this happens and what if this? Well, we can only cover so much.
Yeah, if you go down those what if rabbit holes when PCI is concerned, you're going to have to start, taking the internet into scope.
Yeah, nobody would be compliant.
Nobody's compliant at the end of the day.
Yeah,
no one's allowed that privilege. Oh man. I guess was that all of them?
Yeah,
at a high level.
At a high level. Yeah, I'm sorry, Kyle. Go ahead.
That kind of covers 9. The only other thing we didn't dig into too much is just, again, on the media side. This is one that I personally see more and more is just becoming not applicable because people don't store physical media anymore. But that's the other part of 9 is just if you have any physical paper that has credit card numbers on it, which I can't remember the last time I saw, a lot of physical paper. The only places maybe in call center organizations that receive mail, they might have it for, a short period of time. But any of that physical paper has to be secured. And then the area where it's a little bit more common is if you have, like hard drives or backups that you're storing cardholder data on, those need to be secured. And one thing that people don't always think about is if you're sending that data offsite, again, like a backup situation where you have your hard drives, you're sending them to like an Iron Mountain or something like that. Those backups have to be, done in kind of a certain way. You have to make sure that, management is approving when they're getting sent off. You have to make sure that data is classified. So, marking it as, sensitive or classified or something like that. Wherever you're sending that data to, you have to have a process where you're going to review that physical environment at least annually. So there are a number of things to do around that. But again, it's becoming pretty rare that people actually have to worry about that because, more and more people just are not storing cardholder information. And that's my number one recommendation. If you don't want to worry about requirement 9, for the most part, stop storing card data and half of it becomes not applicable.
And I will offer a warning to all the QSAs out there, when you're going through your on-sites and you're talking to those accounting people, especially about chargebacks, make sure that when they're doing their chargebacks, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll have some sort of fraudulent transaction and they're printing off these credit card numbers on the paper, and then they're storing all these paper documents in a big filing cabinet somewhere to show, hey, here's all the chargebacks. And they've got thousands of credit card numbers on physical media. Those have to be taken care of with some sort of physical control that handles here. I highly recommend QSAs, when they're going through this, to really look at this, because what I've found is there's been a slight change within the past 12 months. I've noticed it in several different entities, where this kind of centralized portal, where from their acquirer, whether that be Chase or Fiserv or whoever else, where they're kind of downloading these chargeback reports. What they're seeing is the default. There is a setting that'll say, no, do not download the full credit card number, but it's not always set by default. So they'll start downloading these files, and the accounting folks are not really thinking anything about it. They're like, oh, yep, that's the credit card number. That's the chargeback. I'll just put this over here in my filing cabinet. And then the QSA comes in and starts asking questions. And then we have thousands of credit cards in this filing cabinet of chargebacks that we've had over the years. And so I really, really challenge QSAs to be really diligent when it comes to asking the accounting about their chargeback and refund process.
Something just on that too, I feel like is a good tip, and something that good QSAs are doing. But even if you're just, a compliance manager at your organization and you're kind of, dealt the hand of dealing with PCI, is something to keep in mind is don't just ask one person something and then whatever they tell you, take that as gospel and be done with it.
Yes.
Every time you're talking to everyone, you have to re-ask the same question over and over, and maybe phrase that question just a little bit differently, but try to get, answers from everybody, from every perspective. I feel like it's probably something Andy's used to, if you guys don't know.
Oh, yeah.
He used to work in law enforcement, and I feel like that's what we need to be at times when we're, coming in to assess an organization, is basically not really interrogating, but kind of interrogating, and be like, so do you do this? Do you store data there? Well, what about in this instance? What happens then? And really, kind of work through all those little kinks and rabbit holes to ferret out where, oh yeah, hey, that isn't checked, and we are actually receiving card data, but we just didn't realize it.
Yeah, whenever Andy goes into interview folks, you're just gonna walk into the room. There's just a lamp sitting on top of one chair in a dark room. Andy's gonna be yelling at you furiously, trying to get the truth out of you. Kyle's gonna be the backup.
It's funny you should say that. I remember when I first became a QSA, I took a more aggressive approach to the rules, and I remember sitting in on. Yeah, I sat in on an interview and my colleague was with me, and I go into this. I get up, I start talking to him. I'm getting like really close to him, and I'm just not I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. And I'm just like, so what you're telling me is this, and I'm like really aggressive. And finally we took a break, and the guy's like, dude, what is happening? And I'm like, he goes, he's not under interrogation. He didn't commit a crime. I'm like, sorry, I'll back off a little bit. But he told me everything I wanted to know. That's the key part.
Oh, that's good. You got it out. Yeah.
Well, actually, we're not doing this. Fun times.
That's funny. That's awesome. Oh man. All right, folks. Any last parting words? I know Kyle kind of wrapped up a bunch of stuff. Andy, do you have anything you want to share?
I hope everybody had a happy new year as we're approaching 4.0 and implementing everything and officially retiring 3.2.1. Please continue to be diligent. Let LBMC help you where we can. Yeah, and guys, never be afraid to reach out to us and ask us questions that we can address here on the podcast.
Awesome, folks. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of LBMC Cybersecurity Sense. I can't stop laughing thinking about Andy interrogating somebody. We'll see you again next month for the month of February. Take care, stay diligent, and we'll speak to you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody.